lot about what is not right with security situation in Nigeria, particularly in far-flung areas outside the main metropolis. Uh, I think at the same time, it needs to be said that the violence uh, is more directed at as a criminal activity for ransom than for religion's sake. I should add here that it's not unusual for Nigeria to see a spike in kidnappings just before Christmas,
Hmm.
as the kidnappers then want to get hefty ransoms, which enables them to buy gifts for themselves and for their near and dear. So
Hmm.
it's a love of the lucre, and I think the authorities should have been well aware of this practice. Uh, uh, be as it may, the incident is, I need to correct what you have described. Uh, Over 300 girls and teachers were taken away from the Niger State Christian missionary school hostels, out of which President has acknowledged that 51 children have escaped. He calls it being having been rescued. One perhaps is being elastic with the truth somewhere. So rest of them are still in captivity, and rescuers have to um, try and persuade the kidnappers to agree on a ransom quantity, or attempt a military rescue attempt, which could be uh, frightfully expensive in terms of human lives. Uh, the area is semi-arid, the Niger state where the kidnappings has taken place, and there are vast spreads of semi-desert situations and forests. So one would have to be careful about those situations. Uh, the president has tried to deflect the criticism of the security agencies, police. Police in Nigeria is a federal agency all over the state. There are no state policemen. It's all controlled from Abuja. So president has to, and his cabinet stand to be blamed. He has announced recruitment of 30,000 more policemen, and he has uh, ordered that all VIP security policemen would be absolved of their duties, and VIPs would get no policemen for their protection, while these policemen would uh, join the hunt for kidnappers. So he's aware of the popular discontent coming out of these instances and the security loopholes that it has exposed. Internationally, I think these kidnappings come at a bad time for the president, with President Trump uh, trying to, as you mentioned, uh, find faults with Nigerian security system, which allows Christians to be killed and persecuted. So here he has initially tried to deflect that criticism by saying that Nigeria would talk to Americans and others to strengthen its security architecture. But this seemed to have gone awry with the latest kidnappings. Perhaps they were on purpose, uh, done uh, on the Christians so as to give further poignancy to what President Trump has been saying. But I doubt if President Trump has any intention of putting boots on ground.
Hmm.
That would be a disastrous situation because the fight in Nigeria's largest or most populous country, I should say,
Hmm.
uh, may involve being sizable numbers and may also involve being there for a very long time.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking further updates. We're now learning that Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has rejected the latest truce proposal submitted by U.S. envoy Masad Boulos on behalf of international mediators. In a video statement released by his office, he has stated that the plan was unacceptable for his government and has criticized the involvement of the Quad, which, as we know, includes the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. He's further claimed that the Quad in the Middle East could not be impartial as long as the UAE remains a member, where he referred to international accusations that Abu Dhabi has supplied support to the Rapid Support Forces. But the UAE has previously denied those claims, despite reports being penned by the United Nations in 2024. Additionally, al-Burhan has noted that the proposal would reduce the role of the armed forces and security agencies while allowing the RSF to retain their current positions. The RSF, however, has reportedly agreed to the truce offer earlier. The army chief's remarks come days after US President Donald Trump stated that he would work to end the war, following a request from the Saudi Crown Prince. Burhan has expressed appreciation for this initiative and stated that he welcomes efforts aimed at a genuine settlement. The Sudanese army chief has been repeatedly urging mediators to adopt an agreement which will ensure that the RSF fully withdraws from areas they are currently controlling and move to designated locations. As of the situation on the ground, the Sudanese army faces immense pressure and has lost its last major stronghold in Darfur last month. The army now controls the country's north, east, and central regions, including Khartoum, while the RSF holds most of the west and parts of southern Kordofan. Still with us on the broadcast is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. Interesting development, of course, Sudan contending this particular proposal that has been made to it by the United States of America due to the involvement of the UAE. For the benefit of our viewers, could you really explain what exactly are the Sudanese army chief's gripes with the United Arab Emirates and the fact that it tacitly does fund the RSF?
You've raised a tall order for me to meet, but I'll try my best. Uh, Sudan is undergoing a civil war for nearly 2.5 years now. It has become the largest humanitarian crisis in the world as of now, with more than 11 million people displaced, nearly a quarter of or a fifth of Sudan's population. Mm, In addition, about 4 million people have been forced to migrate abroad to the neighboring countries such as Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Central African Republic, etc. There's been a vast scale of devastation, and the two contending sides are Sudan Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces. These were partners in overthrowing the last president, uh, al-Bashir, but then fell off with each other when a provisional constitution uh, wanted RSF to be merged with the SAF. The two sides began fighting with each other, and they have been since February 2023, and they have been at each other's throat. The battle lines have shifted considerably, but they seem to have currently coagulated around the way you described it. SAF controlling east, north, and center of Nigeria, of Sudan, while the RSF being predominant in Darfur region to the west, and with its partners in Kordofan region in the south. Now, there's no word about how many people might uh, have been injured or killed, but the number touted vary from 60,000 people killed to thrice that number. It's been major debilitating uh, event for the current century, overshadowing what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine, but receiving far less coverage. Now, international support has been surreptitiously given to both sides. Uh, as reports indicate, RSF is being supported by United Arab Emirates, the warring sides in uh, Libya, one of the warring side, and South Sudan, as well as Wagner Group of Russia, as it existed earlier. The SAF is being supported by Egypt, Saudi Arabia to some extent, and Turkey. Iran has also reportedly supported SAF. Now, with that in picture, various multilateral and bilateral attempts have been made to secure peace and have a ceasefire to control this horrific bloodletting. Uh, these have not succeeded. The current uh, sort of efforts are being undertaken by a quad of four countries: Saudi Arabia, US, Egypt, and UAE. Uh, I should say that Saudi Crown Prince, during his visit to Washington White House, has publicly urged President Trump to redouble his efforts to find suitable solutions to the Sudan crisis so that a ceasefire can be effected. And President Trump has admitted that he was not paying as much attention as he should have to this crisis, being busy with Ukraine and Gaza. But he has acceded to uh, MBS request, Saudi Crown Prince request, and promised that he would do something to make sure that the ceasefire is effected. Now, this statement by the two leaders has been enthusiastically supported yesterday by mm, by SAF Commander Mr. Burhan,
Hmm.
who's also acting as president of the country.
Hmm.
From SAF side, RSF has kept quiet about it. On the same day, as SAF leader Burhan has issued another televised statement saying that quad peace proposal made earlier in the month is not acceptable because it has UAE as a party.
Hmm.
Now, the reply to your question about UAE's machinations for
Hmm.
supporting RSF are plenty.
Hmm.
On political side, it believes that Sudan SAF is beholden to the Islamists, and UAE does not like political Islam. It also wants a friendly uh, government in Khartoum, as it has investments there. It is eyeing the coast of Red Sea coast of Sudan, which is strategically important, and it also is thinking in terms of the agricultural land being appropriated for growing crops
Yes.
to UAE. On the economic side, there's also gold and oil that RSF has, and UAE would be interested. It is estimated that over $1 billion worth of black amount of gold is transshipped by RSF to UAE, and it's melted down in Dubai and introduced as illegitimate gold. So UAE does have some profit to be made from that gold trade. Thank you.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, explaining very comprehensively to our viewers what exactly is going on as far as this particular conflict is concerned. On that note, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has stated that the G20 summit's declaration reflects a renewed commitment to global cooperation, despite tensions with the United States. At the summit's closing ceremony, Ramaphosa emphasized that leaders shared goals such as addressing climate change, debt relief for developing nations, and green energy transitions outweighed differences amongst member states. Now, the summit, which was the first G20 held in South Africa, it concluded with a declaration focusing on issues important to the global south, including climate recovery and financial support for poorer nations. While the US and Argentina opposed the declaration, most G20 members, including China, Russia, and the EU, backed it. The summit was marked by a diplomatic row after the US boycotted the event and South Africa refused to hand over the presidency to a junior US official. Despite this, Ramaphosa has reaffirmed that the G20's purpose is to address global challenges through multilateral cooperation. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has meanwhile also praised the summit's outcomes, highlighting the importance of a continued multilateral engagement. This is the latest that we are tracking on the broadcast as far as the G20 summit is concerned. We in fact heard that soundbite yesterday as well of Cyril Ramaphosa, where he had stated that with the gavel he'll be closing the ceremony. It will be handed over to the United States of America, although the formal handing over did not really take place. The ceremony for the first time ever has broken protocol. This is something unprecedented. That people did not really anticipate would happen, but Trump, of course, did not turn up. Neither did he depute anyone in his position. Many people were expecting Marco Rubio to at least be deputed. That did not happen either. The US administration, of course, has its own reasons and its own gripes with South Africa, whether it is South Africa's case against Israel at the International Criminal Court or even South Africa being a part of BRICS. We're expecting the handover to take place next week. In more news, European and African leaders, including France's Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Friedrich Merz, and Kenya's William Ruto, have gathered in Luanda for the 7th EU-African Union Summit. Talks will center on trade, migration, and critical raw materials, but EU leaders are also seeking to push back against a US draft to end the war in Ukraine, which many see as favoring Moscow. The summit comes as Africa emerges as a diplomatic and economic battleground, with China, Russia, and the US, as well as Gulf states, competing for influence. The EU hopes to showcase investments in infrastructure, energy, and industrial projects, including the Lobito Corridor in Angola under its Global Gateway initiative, while also seeking to secure critical minerals and boost intra-African trade. Experts stress that success depends on delivering real locals' benefits and not just visibility or promises. French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that he believes in a reinvented partnership during a press conference in Gabon alongside President Brice Oligui Nguema. Macron's visit focuses on strengthening and renewing relations between the two countries, coming 2 years after the coup that ended the Bongo family's 55-year rule. This trip marks a continued French effort to reset ties in Central Africa, where political transitions have challenged traditional alliances and sparked debates over France's role in the region. Listen in to what the leaders have had to say.
Je crois dans un partenariat réinventé et en effet dans une relation qui soit respectueuse, où nous devons être exemplaires les uns et les autres et où les situations doivent amener à des partenariats gagnant-gagnant. Je soutiens totalement ce que le président de la République vient de dire, c'est-à-dire que l'Afrique ne peut plus être un continent de simple extraction des ressources. On doit réussir à construire des nouveaux modèles, mais ce qui suppose des investissements énergétiques, des transformations de pratiques, mais où on valorise, où on transforme ces ressources de manière accrue. Et donc nous accompagnons ce partenariat gagnant-gagnant, respectueux des intérêts de chacun. Nous le faisons sur un chemin critique qui doit être aussi cohérent et compétitif.
Mon gouvernement a hérité d'une dette abyssale, fruit d'une gestion irresponsable et opaque. Tout cela orchestré par Ali Bongo Ondimba, son épouse Sylvia et son fils Noureddin, aujourd'hui en fuite à Londres et refusant de se présenter devant les tribunaux de notre pays. Nous comptons sur la coopération judiciaire entre nos deux États pour que les décisions de justice soient exécutées et que les avoirs détournés soient restitués au peuple gabonais.
On that note, viewers, it's a wrap on the Africa Brief. We will continue to track all of these updates very, very closely, but in the meantime, we're dipping into a quick short break.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, viewers. I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. And let's take a look at the headlines this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the tremendous progress made in talks with his...
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs, trends and gadgets from around the world. Now, the escalating threat of political deepfakes is fundamentally challenging democratic integrity ahead of high-stakes global elections in 2025. Driven by cheap, easy AI tools, the disruption extends beyond simple misinformation to sophisticated financial scams. Instances include deepfake videos used by scammers in Romania and Czech elections to promote bogus investment schemes and similar fraud during the Canadian federal election as well. Political manipulation significantly risen due to AI-generated content, with notable incidents impacting high-stakes races and political figures worldwide. Instances include a deepfake video falsely showcasing UK Conservative MP George Freeman announcing his defection, and an AI-generated video used to mislead voters about Senator John Ossoff in the Georgia US Senate race. As the volume of unregulated synthetic content soars, global democracies face unprecedented challenges to authenticate and public faith as well. On that note, to talk more about this, joining us now is Tamir Pariente, co-founder and chief technology officer of Truly. Based in Tel Aviv, Tamir is an expert in specializing in deepfake detection across communication channels. Bringing a background from the IDF intelligence corps, he now leads Truly's efforts to safeguard trust and authenticity, delivering real-time solutions for deepfake fraud. At the outset, I'd like to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. To start it off, what exactly are these AI political deepfakes that we're seeing, especially during election season?
Yes, hello, thank you. So these deepfakes are actually being generated using various technologies, such as image animation and image-to-video technologies that Google just announced, the Veo 3 and Veo 3.1. And Sora of OpenAI. It's extremely easy to use, extremely cheap. Everyone can use it without any regulation. It's crazy.
Indeed, and a quick follow-up to that, the threat is escalating, particularly now since technology has really entrenched every factor of life. It's really democratized as well. People in remote areas also have access to smartphones, cheap data as well, including 5G data. But in your assessment, what factors such as cheap, easy AI tools and the high number of global elections are driving the massive spike in political deepfakes?
Yes, so I think that now, more than ever, not only cheap, but also accessible. It used to be very very difficult to achieve access to big VLLMs, big language models that are capable to generate images and videos. And nowadays it's extremely easy. Anyone can put credit card and start using it, upload one single photo and have it animated to an like Hollywood scene, right?
Yes.
And I think that because of they are shocking videos of very famous people doing shocking things, it is just very straightforward that it gets a lot of attentions from the population via social media, and the recommendation algorithm of Facebook, Instagram are just promoting these videos. And what we see is millions of people just taking the bait and believing such videos before anyone authenticated them.
Indeed, and we've also seen specific instances, especially from the Georgia US Senate race, even to elections in Romania. What do these cases tell us about the varying tactical goals of those who are deploying these deepfakes?
Yes, it's a good point. So in some cases, the goal is like to suppress the turnout, right? By making a candidate appear or say something offensive. And in some cases, we see that deepfake is used to do some fraud, to manipulate people to think that a person wants to get their money, like we saw with Elon Musk like a year ago in the YouTube channel, right? And sometimes it's just simply to create chaos, because chaos benefits whoever is spreading the disinformation. But the pattern is clear. Like, political deepfakes are not always about convincing people. It's like often about destroying trust, which is much harder, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And can you also, for the benefit of our viewers, explain how this threat really fits into the broader debate over social media platform accountability and the need for global regulation of AI-generated political content?
Yes, of course. So social media actually struggling because of AI generated is now cheap, right? It's fast and it's unlimited in any scale. So we need clear global rules for labeling AI generated and especially political content. And we should remove it. It's pretty, it needs to be instant, right? And we also need transparency from the platforms, how they detect, how they moderate, and how they want to prevent the deepfakes. Because they have abused the deepfakes with the recommendation algorithms, as I spoke about before.
Absolutely. And detection technologies also must be faster than the attacks. This is something that those who are tracking political deepfakes have pointed out. This is one primary concern. In your assessment, what then are the biggest technical challenges facing detection specialists today in trying to block real-time deepfake attacks during an election?
Okay, so first of all, it's speed, because it's super, like, deepfake can be generated in like seconds today. So even if I can detect in seconds a deepfake, still the media does not contain one in every 10 videos is fake. It's 1 to 1,000 to 10,000, but these 1 to 10,000 get so much attention. And so you can't just run deepfake detection, which is expensive, by the way, on all the media. That's why Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and everyone is struggling with it, basically.
Indeed, and alongside the big detection platforms, what impact could local tech startups and grassroots organizations have in combating deepfake disinformation and increasing voter education?
So startups can today contribute with the research, right? Because nowadays it's still expensive to detect deepfakes, and we are still researching on cheaper and faster ways to detect it. People are talking about watermarks, that the actual manufacturers of cameras and input devices like microphones would put on like a signature on the video itself, so you would know in the uploading to the social media if this video was generated or created with a real device. So that's one thing that the startup community is working hard on. And we need organizations such as like the big corporations like such as Facebook, Instagram, Google, all of the, as I said, the communication devices, manufacturing. We need them to come together, shake hands, and think about a solution for this.
Indeed, so you've also spoken about the algorithm. You've pointed towards the algorithm many times. That is sort of exacerbating the effects, the reach specifically of these political deepfakes. What do you think can really be done to combat this? As you've mentioned, it's important for all of these global platforms, whether it is a Meta or Google, for them to come together and sort of reach a solution. But that's not really taking place, because the internet is an open space, even if things are made, even if there are certain tools that are put out, the intentions are good, but they're being used for the wrong reasons by individuals. How do you think then could such regulation really take place? Could the algorithm then at least be controlled to sort of limit the reach of these deepfakes?
Yes, so it's a great question, actually, and I think there are many ways to tackle it, but one of the straightforward that comes to my mind is when you have such spike in the algorithm that this video is rocketing, you need to check. Like there is many solutions today to these big platforms to describe what is in this video. And you can check via GPT or any other large language model, you can check what is the probability of such thing happening. If you see the president of North Korea saying, I'm gonna kill everyone, like, you know it's a fake content. So you should, or at least it should trigger, like, we need to check it out, because before we recommend it to the entire world, right?
Indeed, and you also mentioned that there's some sort of pattern that we sort of witness as far as political deepfakes are concerned, not just the frequency, but the way in which these deepfake videos and the original videos are altered to make these deepfakes. Could you tell us a little more about the kind of pattern that certain individuals or organizations follow, and what really is the motive apart from sowing distrust?
You mean about like the why attackers do that?
And the way in which they do that. What have your observations been as far as dealing with deepfake videos are concerned?
Yeah, so there are many ways to create deepfakes. There are like models to swap faces. So I can like appear to you now as Tamir, but I can swap my face to be someone else. And there are models to just take this image and make a scene out of it, like you see Google most advanced model right now. And so different techniques to create such deepfakes, and every one of them has different purpose. So the face swapping are used to make fraud in real-time communication channels. Like you can call someone you love or call someone they think you love, but you're actually an imposter and you are asking them to do something for your benefit, which is false. Like transfer money, do me a favor in this, send me a password for this account. We see many politicians, especially politicians, because they have a lot of power in their accounts, fall for these kind of frauds.
Indeed, and we've discussed the sort of challenges that the specialists have faced, but when you talk to lawmakers as well, we do know that laws regarding AI are not really codified. We've seen the European Union trying to build about a framework, but then there are several other countries where technology has permeated every aspect of life, countries that are still sort of grappling as far as sort of codifying AI and ensuring that it is added to its information technology laws are concerned. In your conversation with lawmakers, what sort of challenges in your observation, do they really face when it comes to bringing about these policies and laws?
Yes, so it's very difficult to maintain in this rapid growth of deepfake technologies. It's very hard to maintain like regulations, because regulations stops the research. And I don't think that politicians really want to stop the research, because there are many benefits to developing such tools. It's not only used for manipulation and fraud, right? It's also used for creating more entertainment, like in the media industry, in the film industry, and also in intelligence industries. So I don't think it's going to be anytime soon regulated, the research. And research often creates products that not everyone can regulate. Like we see that the markets in Europe and in the US are trying to regulate, but China is crazy. China have so many advanced models out there that are free to use by anyone without any regulation.
Yes.
So that's also a problem.
Indeed, and one final question I wanted to understand, since you referred to the US and China, we do know that there's some sort of technological battle that these two countries are engaging in. Both want to have an edge over each other as far as AI is concerned. But when we speak of deep fakes and AI at large, do you see some sort of discrepancy between those who have the hardware and those countries that do not? And is then political deepfakes just a people-to-people and individual-to-individual, organization-to-organization matter, or even sometimes a country-to-country matter?
Yes, so I do think that US is much more advanced in deepfake technologies, like creating and detecting But it is not only about hardware, it's also about research. They are much advanced in research. We know that Meta and Samsung and also Microsoft have many papers and advanced research from 2021 when China didn't even start to work there. And so China, I don't think it will struggle to recreate these research. It's not a hardware issue, like they could afford this number of GPUs. They won't be able to share it in these scales. They don't have this capacity in GPUs to make it available for everyone, but they have it available for like their own government usage. So country to country, I think it is a problem. And also the darknet community, as I said, exploding in open source research that is very dangerous to the population, right?
Yes.
Because it is not regulated, and anyone can buy today in the darknet a deepfake of someone and impersonate to them, and that's a problem. But I don't think it's like a one-to-one or company-to-company problem. It's more about government to government.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us on Trending Tech today on this very important matter.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this episode of Trending Tech. For more such updates in the technological sphere and innovations, stay tuned on NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Thousands of people, primarily members of Generation Z, are marching in major Mexican cities to protest against widespread crime, corruption and government impunity. The demonstrations, which were partly sparked by the recent assassination of an anti-crime mayor, resulted in clashes with police in Mexico City, injuring at least 120 people. Now, to talk about this, joining us is Alex Gonzalez Umarod. He is the editor-in-chief of the Mexico Political Economist. He's also edited and written for publications including White Paper, Rest of World, America's Quarterly, Hyperallergenic, Nexos, and more. He also consults widely on political and economic matters across Latin America. Today, he will be discussing the latest developments in Mexican politics, the economic implications of recent policy decisions, the regional political trends in Latin America, and their impact on global business. Thank you very much for joining us, Alex Gonzalez Umarod. Let's get straight into it. My first question to you is, what is driving the recent wave of Gen Z-led protests across Mexico, and how are authorities responding to this new generation of politically engaged youth?
So those are two different questions. The first answer is there are two main motivations behind the protests. The number one is the perfectly legitimate anger at what is going on in Mexico, the violence and the lack of security that has been going on for decades now. The other half is, of course, the fact that there is clearly a force behind the scenes that is pushing for this this sort of protest. And this will answer your second question, which is that ultimately, I'm not quite sure that this is a Gen Z protest. There are a few young people, but you look at the demographics of the people actually marching, and they are by far boomers, older people, people who aren't actually Gen Z. You see the way the communication is done, how it's done. I think ultimately what you can conclude is this wasn't a protest by politically engaged youth. This is actually more clearly a protest by organizers who haven't quite revealed themselves. I don't know if there's anything too sinister. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the opposition in Mexico is very discredited. And so it often mobilizes in a covert way so as not to show its true colors.
Yes, and Alex, following on from that, another leading story coming out of Mexico, of course, would be the recent harassment incident involving President Sheinbaum. And what does that incident reveal about broader security lapses and the polarized political climate in Mexico right now?
It's a disgrace for many reasons. Of course, the sexual harassment of the president is not only disgusting because of the fact that it is the sexual harassment of a woman, any woman. It is the president of Mexico who should have had a far more stringent security contingent, literally hours after the brutal murder of a very popular mayor in a different state. You have this man coming up from behind her and groping her. Completely unacceptable, both in moral terms, but also in terms of her security unit.
Yes, and of course we've mentioned about the killing of this mayor in Mexico. How does this incident speak of the law and order situation in the country?
Mexico is a very big country with a very complex system of security apparatuses, cartel relationships. And so when we talk about Mexico, we're actually talking about a series of different places. A really tragic stat that I like to tell people is that 50% of all the brutal violence going on in Mexico is concentrated in just a tiny handful of Mexico's 2,000 municipalities, which on one side means there are places like the Yucatan Peninsula, which are safer than Canada. You've got Mexico City, which is safer than New York or Washington, D.C. But then you've got places like Michoacan, Uruapan, where the mayor was killed, where there is violence unlike anywhere else in the world that we've seen. And so that's the enormous complexity about Mexico. Loads of violence concentrated in very, very specific places.
It's very interesting, and the United Nations has of course rated Mexico as one of the most violent countries for women in the world. We have seen many Mexican women now demanding access to women-only taxis and rideshare services. And what does this say about the current state of their safety? What is the government doing to combat this also?
Mexico, again, is a very polarized place when it comes to this. Obviously, feminicides are rampant, and they have been classified as such by the government. But there are also lots of interesting solutions going on across the country. Mexico is one of the few places in the world that has pretty much complete gender parity in politics. So more than 50% of the Congress is women, more than 50% of the judiciary is women, our president is a woman, and yet, to a great extent, that underscores the terrible plight of women, that even in these conditions where women are represented fairly in politics, even then they're under enormous threat in Mexico.
Let's now move on to the country's relationship with the broader continent. How does Mexico's internal challenges within the broader political and social shifts happening across Latin America, from economic instability to rising authoritarianism tendencies?
Mexico's an interesting place because it's bucked a lot of trends recently. As the rest of the world moves to the right, Mexico's left-wing government has consolidated. That worries a lot of people because they see the consolidation of a massive party, sort of reminiscent to India's Congress party, that worries a lot of people because they say it'll become overbearing, authoritarian, and repress the rest of the opposition. The issue to me is they've won it so far relatively fair and square. It's after years of right-wing misgovernment of Mexico that the left-wing government was introduced into Mexico by democratic mandate on a massive scale. President Sheinbaum, even though her ratings have gone down since this violence, is still an enormously popular president who can mobilize enormous forces to her. The issue is, I think, on the opposition side, a lot of the claims about dictatorship and authoritarianism actually come from the ineptitude of the opposition, which is not able to capitalize on a lot of the legitimate anger in Mexico properly. You can see it through how they've tried to jump onto these protests. So they say they're completely nonpartisan, and yet I only see partisan and party political representatives talking about it on the television. And so to me, that represents the fundamental issue of Mexico's opposition. It has a lot of people it can and should work with, and yet it is completely unable to, through corruption, through the fact that they've been destroyed at the polling booths, and they're still sort of recuperating.
Now, given current tensions over migration, trade and fentanyl trafficking, how would you characterize the state of US-Mexico relations today and where they are likely headed in 2025 under Sheinbaum's leadership?
The state of US-Mexico relations at the moment is surprisingly good. When it comes to security, it's sort of shocking because you see US Secretary of State Marco Rubio coming to Mexico, and he is famously a very hard man when it comes to representing America's interests. And he came to Mexico to say that bar none, Mexico is the best partner they have when it comes to security. So Mexico and the US are working very, very closely because they have a common enemy, which is organized crime. So on that front, I think we have a lot of positive work going on, a lot of intelligence sharing, and beyond the posturing, a lot of collaboration. The issue comes when it comes to trade. Trade is a big issue for the United States because it is woken up to the fact that China is nipping at its heels, not only in cheap imports, but also in high technology. So they're having to reconfigure. I think at first they thought from the United States that they could basically isolate and do an America first and an only America vision of manufacturing and commerce and services. They've realized that they don't have enough people or the capacity to do that, especially not in the short term. And so that's where Mexico comes in. Mexico is essential to the United States, not only because we send them most of their products when it comes to manufacturers, when it comes to agricultural services, etc., but also in terms of security. The United States can't keep up with China's pace unless it's working alongside Mexico, which doesn't just provide cheap labor, which is the sort of classic excuse that people use, but rather specialized labor that Americans are simply not doing anymore. And so a lot of the US auto manufacturing sector depends on Mexico's, for example. It's not that you could get rid of Mexico, cut off Mexico, and then suddenly have a thriving US auto manufacturers sector. You'd actually get the opposite. You'd hurt them. And so I think that's what President Trump has started to realize slowly but surely, as he realizes how deeply integrated Mexico and the United States are. It's an issue he wants to deal with. He thinks some things are unfair, but I think he's come to realize that Mexico is a net asset for the US, not a problem.
Alex Gonzalez or Merod, thank you very much for joining us here on Focal Length. A fascinating conversation about a fascinating country. But with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The US and Ukraine have said that they have drafted a refined peace framework in Geneva to revise an earlier plan criticized as too favorable towards Russia, with both sides committing to intensive work before a Thursday deadline. Meanwhile, the White House has said that the updated plan meets Ukraine's strategic requirements amid ongoing questions about security guarantees for Kyiv, as Secretary of State Marco Rubio led the U.S. delegation amid ongoing questions about security guarantees. Russian forces have staged a massive drone attack on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, killing 4 people and injuring several others. Rescue efforts for people trapped in the rubble are still underway. The Israeli army released a video claiming to show the strike that killed Hezbollah's top military in the southern suburb of Beirut, despite a US-brokered truce a year ago. The strike, the first on the outskirts of the Lebanese capital in months, targeted Iran-backed Hezbollah's acting chief of staff, Ali Tabatabai, the military has said in a statement. French President Emmanuel Macron met with his counterpart Brice Oligui Nguema from Gabon in Libreville. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a reinvented partnership following bilateral talks. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has urged German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to adopt a rational and pragmatic China policy, calling on Berlin to prioritize shared interests during their meeting at the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The talks signal a move to repair strained ties after German Foreign Minister postponed his China visit due to lack of high-level meetings. Indonesia has introduced the Global Citizenship of Indonesia (GCI) permit, allowing former Indonesian citizens to live and work in the country indefinitely as a substitute for dual citizenship, which remains illegal under national law. The policy is modeled after India's OCI program, applies to adults who must otherwise choose a single nationality at 18 years of age. More than 11,000 people in 7 Malaysian states have been affected by flooding caused by torrential rain. A report from the National Disaster Management Agency showed 11,009 people from 3,839 families who have been affected by flooding as of 6 a.m. local time. Now we start with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the aggressor must pay for the war it started, calling a decision on the use of frozen Russian assets crucial for justice and for Ukraine's survival. He says Kyiv will keep working with global partners on peace proposals, but only on terms that strengthen Ukraine and do not weaken its position on the battlefield or at the negotiating table. Zelensky has also stressed that the principal amounts of Russian state assets held abroad, not just the profits, should be directed towards defense, reconstruction, and humanitarian needs. He added that European and G7 decisions in the coming weeks will determine whether Ukraine can secure long-term financial stability as it faces continued Russian strikes and pressure along the front. He has said that Kyiv is ready to discuss compromises, but only those that protect Ukrainian sovereignty and never any that reward aggression or signal fatigue from its partners.
I'm glad that the Ukrainian Crimean platform and its parliamentary track continues to work and keeps attention on a simple truth. Every nation and every state must be respected, and the core principle that kept Europe peaceful longer than at any other time in its history must be protected. These principles are clear: respect for human life, no changing borders by force, and no spheres of influence, a polite term used to cover the desire to dominate other nations and wage wars of aggression. This is exactly what the Crimean platform stands for, refusing to accept that launching wars of conquest is normal and refusing to normalize cruelty toward people and nations. Thank you for taking this principled position and for clearly stating that the annexation of Crimea in 2014 was illegal.
The Kremlin has said that it considers it to be inappropriate to discuss elements of European counterproposals on Ukraine, including wording related to NATO through the media. Kremlin officials stressed that negotiations should remain confidential. Moscow has also stated that there are currently no plans for a meeting this week between Russian and US delegations, and noted that it has not received any official information from the Geneva talks on potential Ukraine peace efforts. Separately, the Kremlin has confirmed that a telephone call is scheduled between President Vladimir Putin and the President of Turkey on Monday. Now for this discussion, we welcome Andrea Lucidi. He's a war reporter, joins us live from Lugansk. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. how do you think, how effective can this peace plan be while the war rages on, escalating from both sides? And what do you think, what were the changes made to 28-point US brokered peace plan to cater more towards Ukraine as well?
Well, this plan is obviously a base for future discussion about the possibility to make a deal or have an immediately peace between Russia and Ukraine. But also in the new plan, there are some points that Moscow cannot accept. And from the Kremlin, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, many times in these months, we hear communication about the necessity to discuss about the deep causes of this conflict. And also the position of Europe is completely unclear about this, because it seems to me that they want to follow a parallel way to the peace. They make a parallel peace plan without any consultation with the President Trump or Marco Rubio. And yes, seems that the coalition of the Willinger want to propose to Zelensky another plan, more profitable for him, more in favor of Ukraine, but from my point of view, completely unacceptable from the Russian Federation and completely far from the Russian request. The main request from Russia was that Ukraine need to be a neutral country for the future without any access to the NATO. And in the second plan that I saw from the coalition of the Willinger, this point is brought and very important for them. So Ukraine in NATO, and this is unacceptable for Russia.
And Andrew, what do you think, how effective would be whatever comes out of it? As you know, Russia is whatever US suggested, it seems like Russia feels like it's not enough catered towards Russia, and Ukraine feels like it's not catered enough towards. So how effective would it be, and what do you think is motivating US to broker peace between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, the US in this moment, the main task of the President Donald Trump is obviously to stop this war, because I think he wants to focus more attention on other zones in the world, China, Taiwan, and of course it's important for the new foreign policy of the US to broke this relationship between Russia and China. And for this, they are available to give some concession to Russia, like the control of Donbass, like the control of the regions of Kherson and Zaporozhye, that are important for Moscow. But the main thing is that Zelensky is thinking that he can proceed his war without Washington, without the main. Also, Zelensky called the US as our main partner. So this is very important. And I think that the European Union have not the resources for support Zelensky like the US are making now. And if this plan can be a base for future negotiation, we need to accept and we need to be ready to accept that Ukraine need to make some concession to Russia for stop the war. But at this moment, it's completely, for me, it's completely unclear the position of Europe, because they are supporting, in fact, they are supporting the continuation of the war.
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Andrea Lucidi for joining us today as a war reporter from Lugansk, Russia. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Middle East. Israeli Army Chief Eyal Zamir has announced that several senior Israeli army commanders who served before and during the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack will be dismissed from reserve service. Zamir has said that he has fired and also reprimanded several senior commanders over the military's failure to protect the civilians of the State of Israel. The announcement marks one of the most far-reaching accountability actions in IDF's history. It follows what Samir described as a thorough, professional, and in-depth inquiry into the systematic breakdowns that allowed the devastating assault. The October 7, 2023 attack was carried out by Hamas and other Gaza-based militants and saw coordinated infiltrations by land, air, and sea. Over 1,200 Israelis were killed, most of them being civilians, and approximately 240 hostages were abducted into Gaza. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Now, Sol, do you think this accountability is legitimate and logical for Israel to do, as we know that this is the biggest such action in IDF's history? Sol, you might be muted here.
Hi.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, it certainly was legitimate. It was the biggest action of its type in Israel's history, firing and dismissing and removing from reserve so many generals. However, it was by far the biggest failure in the history of the military. And although the war since has turned out in Israel's favor, nevertheless, the failures on that day that took 6-7 hours to get under control, when a country with a huge military budget managed by these generals was unable to retard or prevent the ingress of 3,000 or 4,000 mostly lightly armed terrorists, is astonishing and will need to be investigated for decades to come. The lessons that will be learned from it are almost endless, but removing the generals that were sitting at the top of the IDF at the time seems to be absolutely critical. Whatever they did wrong might not be known yet, but certainly the mentality, the general complacency, their understanding of the field situation, of the strategic situation, and of the malevolent intent of their enemies, their underestimation of that intent is what led to the disaster. It should never have been allowed to happen.
So how do you...
You're absolutely correct. These people should be fired. And in my opinion, there are one or two of them whose incompetence was so great that it reaches the level of criminal negligence, and they should be charged and jailed.
So you're saying that some officers were too relaxed, or they weren't attentive towards these?
Absolutely. And we even have information that they published themselves from the IDF spokesman's office in the weeks before, where a number of generals went on a tour of the Gaza border and reassured civilians in the area, and also via social media to the entire country, that there was nothing to worry about, that Hamas had no intention of attacking Israel. And it would have been one thing if they just told that to the people to calm them down, but it seems quite clear that they absolutely believed that themselves. This was their perspective that they were working on. This is why there were only a few hundred troops in the border area facing what they knew was an army of 35,000 armed men. The level of incompetence and complacency is staggering, absolutely staggering. And the lower you go down the chain of command, to some extent, up to a point. So the people who, for example, were in charge of the Gaza division and the people who were running the Southern Command, who were directly responsible, well, their level of responsibility, in my opinion, is even higher, because they really only had one job. Their job was to sit there facing the Gaza border, noticing there are 35,000 enemies on the other side trying to get in, and ensure that they couldn't. And as you go up higher at the chain of command, the distance from the responsibility is slightly further, but at the same time, the buck stops there. So all that entire chain of command, from the local field divisions on the southern border, all the way up to the top of the army at the time, and the intelligence services, and the military intelligence, all of them really have to go. And some of them, in my opinion, need to go to jail.
Right, and so why do you think these people who exactly, like you mentioned, that they only have one job to do, especially being in the border, staying alert, why do you think they underestimated these?
It seems to me, from speaking to people who met all these people, that the the kind of man, because it is almost all men, who would stay in the army after their compulsory service and take a career in the army for decades, were not necessarily the best soldiers, the most strategic thinkers, or even the brightest people. They were the people who, for whatever reason, thought this would be a useful career with the opportunity of a very early pension at perhaps 45, at which point they can go into business. This was essentially their plan. And from the other direction, how these people were selected, it was also clear that it was an old boys club, that the people who were allowed to rise to the top of the IDF and intelligence services were not necessarily even the brightest of those careerists, who themselves were not the brightest. They were picked because of their family connections, their historical, almost clan connections within Israeli culture, because of political views that were felt to be congenial to the established culture at the top of the IDF. So it was always replacing itself with a kind of groupthink. Right. And that groupthink, essentially, more than anything, right, except perhaps the Hamas's own actions, of course, right, is really what led to the calamity. Because even faced with mounting evidence that Hamas were absolutely planning to do what they did, I mean, Hamas even built a mock-up Israeli village about 3 kilometers from the Israeli border. And the Israeli low-level soldiers are watching Hamas train there, doing kidnapping and murder operations in this mock-up Israeli village. They passed the information up to the chain of command, and yet nothing was done. The levels of incompetence and groupthink are astonishing, and it can only be due to, on the one hand, careerists who were not the best, and them themselves being picked by people right at the top, who themselves, of course, are also careerists from a generation before, who are picking people out of that pool of careerists due to their personal affiliations rather than their competence. Yes. And as a result, we have what we have, and all these people have to go.
Yes. I hope that will be changed, but thank you very much, Sol, for joining us today and sharing that insight as a political commentator from Tel Aviv. Now we move on to Asia. Hong Kong leader John Lee has said that his government fully backs China's diplomatic stance towards Japan and closely monitors the growing tensions between Beijing and Tokyo. His comments mark the first public response from a Hong Kong official since the dispute escalated more than 2 weeks ago. The spat began after Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi told the parliament that a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan could prompt a military response from Tokyo. Beijing has earlier condemned these remarks and says that they send a wrong signal on Taiwan. John Lee says the comments damage the atmosphere for China-Japan engagement and says Hong Kong will align its actions with national interests. He does not directly confirm that Hong Kong suspends exchanges with Japan, but he says all arrangements will respect national dignity. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, this is, so where exactly does Hong Kong politically align itself, the current government, and what is their stance?
Of course, China is calling the Chinese citizens not to go Japan. And so same thing could apply to the Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government will call the Hong Kong people not to go Japan. So that could happen. But at the same time, this attitude itself proves that the one country, two system, which means that respecting democracy, is not working in China. So China's policy is Hong Kong's policy means that one country, one system, not two systems. So that is the reason this is a matter. Because the Prime Minister Takaichi's explanation about the crisis in Taiwan, just side of Japan, is crisis for Japan, means that this is just honest explanation. Under the democratic rule, this is not provocative, just an honest explanation from leader to the Japanese citizen to promote discussion about Japan's attitude, and this is the responsibility of the leader of the democratic country. So this is not provocative. In the other countries, the same thing could happen in the democratic country. But in China, this is not. In China, there is no democracy. So freedom of speech is not exist. And now China's promise, the Hong Kong could be another system, even in the one country. That was China's promise. But look at Hong Kong now. In this case, of course, Hong Kong has only one system, which is China's system, and following the China's policy. So this means that they are not democratic. And that is the reason the Prime Minister Takaichi's remark is provocative, China think, because this is challenging against China, challenging against China's rule, China's dominance in the Northeast Asia, because they are not democratic government. Democracy is not a regime they are respecting. So that's why this is a problem they are thinking, and they try to escalate the pressure to the Prime Minister Takaichi government. But view from democracy, Japan's attitude is not provocative. China's attitude, only China's attitude is provocative.
Yes.
That is the current situation.
Yes, and lastly, if you can briefly tell us why is Hong Kong aligning with China right now, especially now that tensions are rising between Japan and Beijing? What are the risks or benefits for Hong Kong aligning with China?
No, Hong Kong is not free. Hong Kong is just a governor under the Chinese government. Chinese government is central government, and Hong Kong's government just a local government. Governor of the one province of China, something like that. So that's why they are following the China. So Chinese government asks the Hong Kong government try to making the pressure to Japan along with the China's government policy. Do not go to Japan means that which will apply the people in Hong Kong too, because Hong Kong people is Chinese under the one central government, under the one system of China. So that's why the Hong Kong people, as a Chinese, they cannot go Japan under the Chinese government. Hong Kong is not independent. Hong Kong is not independent system under one country. One country, one system is China's way, not one country, the two systems China promised in the past. That is a reality view from this Hong Kong's government's remark.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for joining us and sharing that insight from Japan. Now we move on to our next news. 3 suicide bombers have attacked the headquarters of Pakistan's paramilitary forces, killing 3 personnel and injuring at least 5 people. The Pakistani police has stated that the attackers opened fire as they forced themselves into the headquarters of the Frontier Constabulary in Peshawar city before blowing themselves up inside the complex. The headquarters of the force is located in a densely populated area of Peshawar, the capital of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Meanwhile, no militant group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. An eyewitness and the chief of Capitol Police has responded to the attack. Let's just listen into what they have shared.
मैं इस घंटों में बोर्ड हॉस्पिटल में ड्यूटी कर रहा हूँ और मैं ड्यूटी के लिए आ रहा था, यूटर्न ले रहा था कि यूटर्न के दौरान मैं ब्लास्ट हो गई, तो बस फिर मुझे पता नहीं चला कि क्या हुआ है क्या नहीं हुआ है।
8:11 पर फेडरल कॉन्स्टेबलरी का जो हेडक्वार्टर है पेशावर सदर में, उसके गेट पर एक खुदकश हमलावर ने खुदकश हमला किया और उसके बाद 2 हमलावर ने एंट्री की है। उस खुदकश हमलावर की वजह से 3 एहलकार मौके पर शहीद हुए। 2 जिन्होंने एंट्री की उनको फौरी तौर पर न्यूट्रलाइज करके और फेडरल कॉन्स्टेबलरी के एहलकारों ने अपनी अलर्टनेस की वजह से बड़े नुकसान से बचा।
Now we move on to Australia. Australian far-right Senator Pauline Hanson has caused a stir in Parliament on November 24 by wearing a burqa as a part of her campaign to ban the Muslim garment in public. Hansen, who has previously worn the burqa in the parliament in 2017, aimed to highlight her proposed bill to outlaw burqas and other full-face coverings. Her stunt followed the Senate's rejection of her bill. Muslim senators, including Greens Mehreen Faruqi and Independent Fatima Payman, has condemned the act as racist, calling it disgraceful and accusing Hansen of displaying blatant racism. Both Penny Wong, leader of the Labour government in the Senate, and Anne Ruston from the opposition also denounced the action, with Wong calling it not worthy of a senator when Hansen refused to remove the burqa. Senate proceedings were suspended. Let's listen in.
President, a dress code might be a choice of the senators, but racism should not be the choice of the Senate. This is a racist senator displaying blatant racism and Islamophobia, President, and someone should pull her up on that.
Whatever views we may have on policy is to be this disrespectful of the chamber and of people of faith. Whatever our own beliefs may be, the sort of disrespect that you are engaging in now is not worthy of a member of the Australian Senate, and it should not be allowed to stand.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World, and let's take a look at the headlines this hour. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the tremendous progress made in talks with his Ukrainian counterparts in Geneva as the US and Ukraine has put forward an updated proposal for peace between Russia and Ukraine. At least 6 people have been killed in what is being described as a suicide bombing in Pakistan's Peshawar. The target of the attack was a Pakistani paramilitary force headquarters in the city. The Israeli army released a video claiming to show the strike that killed Hezbollah's top military commander in the southern suburb of Beirut, despite a US-brokered truce a year ago. The strike is the first on the outskirts of the Lebanese capital in months and targeted Iran-backed Hezbollah's acting chief of staff Ali Tabtabai. French President Emmanuel Macron has met with his counterpart Brice Oligui Nguema from Gabon in Libreville. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a reinvented partnership following bilateral talks. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has stated that she is open to talks with China amidst a rapidly escalating diplomatic row between the two countries over her remarks on Taiwan. Russian forces staged a massive drone attack on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, killing 4 people and injuring several others. Rescue efforts for people trapped in the rubble are currently underway. Sudanese Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has now called the latest truce proposal sent by US envoy Masad Boulos on behalf of a group of mediators the worst yet and unacceptable to his government. This comes after US President Trump announced that he will be looking into the situation in the civil war-torn country at Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's request. More than 11,000 people in 7 Malaysian states have been affected by flooding caused by torrential rain. A report from the National Disaster Management Agency showcases that 3,839 families have been affected by flooding. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has emphasized that any decisions within the purview of the EU or NATO regarding the ongoing peace talks will be made by member states through separate discussions. Speaking about the latest round of negotiations, Stubb has noted that while progress had been made, significant issues remain unresolved. In fact, the statement follows his conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's welcomed the progress achieved during talks between the United States and Ukraine in Geneva. However, he has stressed that the path to a final agreement would require further work and cooperation amongst all parties involved. With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji. He is an international affairs geostrategic expert joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've been tracking what's taking place as far as Donald Trump's 28-point peace plan between Russia and Ukraine is concerned. Europe, of course, and Ukrainian allies in Europe had raised their contentions earlier with regards to a plan that was being seen as one which is rather lenient towards Russia. The original draft had called for Ukraine to cede its territory. It also called for Ukraine to abandon its NATO ambitions. Though there has been news coming in that Marco Rubio and Ukrainian officials in Geneva have now reworked this plan. What are your expectations? Could we see some sort of easing out on these restrictions on Ukraine? There's also talks that the cap that has been placed on the limits of the Ukrainian army could then also be relaxed.
Yeah, Pia, good afternoon. Thank you for getting me for your show. It's always a great exposure to learn from all the shows that you anchor, and as a student of geopolitics, I have something to share as well. Now, I feel this is a golden moment, and some glimmer of hope is holding out at the end of the tunnel. And Donald Trump, for one, all the brickbat that he has taken, he's one person who stood out, who stuck his neck out, at least striving to bring peace and normalcy, restore law and order, bring some kind of stoppage or ceasefire to this mindless conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I'm very happy. And the proposal which he espouses, this 28-point, I personally feel as a student, I have been joining the dots. The only way forward or work out a solution is exactly the way he has done. And a lot of people, a lot of critics, they say it is a draft drafted in Russian language, straight from Moscow. It has been translated into English, and it has been presented as a peace plan. Well, that's the only way, because people who discard the history may have to take their mind back. They are not prepared to accept the assurance given by James Baker on 9th of February 1990 to Mikhail Gorbachev. Organizations such as NATO, which had 12 founding members, and on 9th of February 1990, after disintegration of USSR, here is the Secretary of State of USA giving assurance to Mikhail Gorbachev that not an inch of expansion of sphere of influence of NATO will take place. And if I recall and respect my memory, by then the number of members of NATO had come to 16. And in just about 4 to 7 years' time, the number had gone up to 19. And today we are sitting on a number of 32 countries who have become permanent members of NATO. So what it means is, including some of the erstwhile countries of the former Soviet Union. Yes. So when a thing like this takes place, the trust takes a beating. So therefore, what Donald Trump has actually given out in this 28 points is, yes, one thing you alluded in the last of your preamble is that the scale down of the forces of Ukraine has to be ensured. That is, from the current 900,000, it has to come down to 600,000 troops, one. Number two, there are two divisions in which he includes. The first division is going to be including the Donetsk it will have Luhansk, and it will have Crimea, of course, will form a part. So these are the three provinces of the oblast which are going to form part of it, and they will be called as the de facto. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson are the 1, 2, 3, 4 provinces. They will be. Moscow has annexed them in 2014 onwards in slow-moving operations.
Yes.
Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk will be recognized as de facto Russian, and Kherson and Zaporizhia will be frozen, which means Russia will keep the territories of these two oblasts that it has captured. Russia will relinquish the territories it has seized, other than the 5 oblasts in Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk. Ukraine will limit the size of the forces which I have given out. Plus, it will also abandon its aspiration to become a NATO member. And also, Ukraine is going to be assured of a reliable security guarantee. That is what is important. Now, there is a second one which is actually circulating from Donald Trump, that apart from these assurances, there is a security guarantee clause which says that Ukraine, Russia, US, European Union, and NATO, they will promise a NATO-style security assurance to Ukraine for up to 10 years, which can be renewed by mutual agreement. And I would also stress here, Pia, if you allow me, a significant and sustained armed attack by Russia on Ukraine shall be regarded as an attack threatening the peace and security of the transatlantic community. These are very, very strong statements which safeguards the aspiration and the requirement of Russia, as also Ukraine to large an extent, except for one grievance. One complaint which Ukraine may have is that ceding the land territory, it is actually challenging the very concept of sovereignty of territory or territorial integrity of a country in 21st century. But be that as it may, everything is not as per the rule book. There are so many things. We have examples of Korea, South and North Korea. We have example of Cyprus. Why go that far? In India and Pakistan, we have a territory which rightfully belongs to India. It is under the occupation of Pakistan. Why hasn't the United Nations been able to do anything to give that back to us, despite the fact that the guideline given in the United Nations resolution way back in 1949 have not been fulfilled? Pakistan has to vacate the troops from the Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Only then the referendum, and meaning of referendum has lost its relevance after so many times elections have taken place. Article 370 has been abrogated. So such like issues, So therefore, I would say this is a very, very golden opportunity. It has come the way of Ukraine. The Ukraine President Zelensky has also conveyed his gratitude to United States, going by the latest bulletins coming in the media. Western is also our side of the hemisphere. And third and most important is there are some criticisms and complaints will continue from European Union. But be mindful of the fact, if this mindless conflict has to come to an end, there is no better solution than what Donald Trump has given. Minor tweaking will take place, minor modification. But this is the way to go ahead with some meaningful and substantive thing. People may say it is in favor, it is giving a concession to Russia. Well, that is the way Russia, I take the mind back of our viewers to one of the old Saint Thucydide historian of Greece. Once upon a time, he wrote in one of his documents that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. What it means is, today in 21st century, if at all we have to relate to this statement, pragmatism is the only way forward to bring in peace and harmony. And pragmatism means power, and the powerful will always have, in Hindi we call it as jiski lathi uski bhesh. So what it means is that will Ukraine, by any standard, 32 countries supporting Ukraine, has not been able to mitigate or reduce the intensity of warfare against Russia. Russia is the erstwhile superpower of Soviet Union legacy having transferred or passed on to it. So will any kind of countermeasure to bring down or bleed Russia to death, will it ever fructify? So therefore, to bring in an end to this conflict, I think Donald Trump's proposal holds a lot of good. and it has got a lot of substance and meaning. And in foreseeable future, we should be expecting something meaningful and constructive taking place to minimize the geopolitical churn in the world order.
Indeed, and Trump has been, specifying that the loss of lives and preventing the loss of lives on the front lines is his very first priority. Major General Sudhakarji, I'd like to thank you for once again taking out time, sharing your analysis with our viewers. It's always a pleasure to learn from you as well. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the war that's taking place in Europe towards what's happening in the United States of America. We're now learning that the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is planning to move all remaining enforcement cases and litigation to the Department of Justice due to severe funding shortfalls. The CFPB warned that it expects to exhaust its funds after the 31st of December, raising the possibility of immediate furloughs or unpaid staff as well. This move marks a major step in the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the agency despite a court order prohibiting its shutdown. Now, since its creation after the 2008 financial crisis, the CFPB has returned over $21 billion to consumers but has faced years of legal and political attacks. Democrats have warned that transferring cases to the Justice Department could leave consumers more vulnerable, especially to fraud, scams, and unfair financial practices. The latest that we are tracking on the broadcast as far as this particular case is concerned, the Trump administration is attempting to effectively dismantle the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that was established in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis that wreaked havoc across the globe. And this transfer of CFPB enforcement cases to the Department of Justice under the Trump administration is being touted to increase the speed, the prioritization, the outcomes of the litigation as well, because up until now, the CFPB has witnessed funding shortfalls and has in fact warned that after the December 31st this year, the possibility of immediate furloughs or unpaid staff could increase as well. Therefore, this move, of course, marks a major step in the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the agency, despite a court order prohibiting its shutdown. This particular agency has faced years of legal and political attacks, but it has, despite all of that, managed to return over $21 billion to consumers. Democrats, meanwhile, are warning that transferring cases to the Justice Department could leave consumers more vulnerable to fraud and scams and being taken advantage of. But this is, of course, the latest that is coming in. An appeals court earlier, back in August, had in fact cleared the way for the restructuring at CFPB. It was a 2-1 decision in which Trump appointees had ruled that the sweeping drive to close the agency could not be reviewed by the courts. It was prohibited, but it did clear the way for the Trump administration to largely dismantle the work. It had lifted a lower court's injunction that had preserved the agency's structure. It, of course, barred mass layoffs for months as well. But of course, now the Trump administration is ordering the Consumer Protection Agency to stop work, closing the building as well. Remember, this entire agency, the CFPB, was effectively created to protect consumers after the 2008 financial crisis and subprime mortgage lending scandal. In fact, Russell Watt, the newly installed director, of the Office of Management and Budget, directed the CFPB to stop work on proposed rules, to suspend the effective dates on any rules that were finalized but not yet effective, and to stop investigative work and not begin any new investigations. The agency, as I mentioned earlier, has been a target of several political attacks ever since the Obama administration had pushed to include it in the 2010 financial reform legislation that followed the 2007-8 financial crisis. In fact, officials have also stated that the CFPB's headquarters in Washington, D.C. are likely to be closed down as well. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Mutler, former Associated Press Bureau Chief, joining us from Romania. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We're, of course, tracking what the Trump administration is planning to do with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It is planning to remove all remaining cases and transfer it to the Justice Department. The Democrats are arguing that such a move could lead to the dismantling of the organization itself, which would then leave consumers more vulnerable to cases such as fraud and scams and being taken advantage of in financial means as well. I wanted to understand from you, apart from this, what other implications are there? There is a court ruling that does prohibit this from taking place.
Well, I mean, generally, it's a story about the Trump administration trying to stop any independent organizations, think tanks, NGOs, et cetera, and bring everything under his administration, the Justice Department. He doesn't want any organization which is independent of the administration causing him problems. He's seeking to exert control over it. So that's the basic story, what it's about.
Indeed. And could we then expect some sort of a legal battle to play out as well? Because up until now, we've seen courts rule that his administration must not dismantle the organization. The courts did, in fact, provide a pathway towards the restructuring of the CFPB, but not outrightly dismantling it.
Yes, I think we can expect legal battles as we've seen with other cases that Trump has pushed for. It's a battle between the justice system and the courts, rule of law, and Trump. So I think we can expect this to be protracted. He's been very clear that he will use all legal means possible, and he's trying to get this organization under his control. That is part of his policy, and yes, we can expect ongoing court battles. What the final outcome will be is unclear for the moment, but it is an attempt to weakening democracy in the United States.
All right, ma'am, requesting you to stay on with us as we're shifting our focus away from the United States of America towards Belgium. We're now learning that Belgium is set for 3 days of strikes, with unions protesting government austerity measures, including spending cuts and labor law reforms. The strike will unfold in 3 waves, starting with transportation disruptions, a public sector strike, and a full general strike on the Wednesday. SNCB trains will operate at reduced capacity, and several Eurostar services have been cancelled as well. Schools, hospitals and other public services will join the strike on Tuesday, that is tomorrow, with no flights expected at Brussels, Zaventem and Charleroi airports on Wednesday as well. The protests target Prime Minister Bart de Wever's proposed budget cuts aimed at reducing Belgium's high national debt. Unions argue that the measures threaten social programs, while de Wever's government seeks agreement on reforms by Christmas. Still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Mutler. I wanted to understand from you, on one hand, Belgium's government is facing mounting debt and pressure due to that. On the other, the unions are arguing for the fact that the spending should not be cut down and reform should not take place as far as labor laws are concerned. Do you think the de Wever government will try to strike a balance between the two, or will it go ahead with its current plan?
I imagine today there'll be lots of negotiations between the union and the government. The government will be seeking to alleviate the pain of all this closure, which is going to cost the country a lot socially, economically, politically, et cetera, So I think there'll be a lot of negotiations going on behind the scenes, and whether a compromise can be made between union leaders and the government is unsure. But obviously this is going to hit Belgium, and not just Belgium, is, you know, it's a very important capital. You have the European Union there, other international organizations. So it's not just the Belgian people who are being affected, but also internationally it'll be very badly affected. So I would imagine there'll be negotiations going on, because the strikes are very serious. I mean, if it's transportation and hospitals and schools, it was like a shutdown for the country. So I think the government will be trying to you know, negotiate with the union so that they can come to some settlement. It's unclear how tough the unions are in Belgium, whether they will press with maximalist demands, or whether they'll be able to reach a compromise. Generally, unions in the end do reach a compromise, but they have a couple of key demands. So I think that's what will be happening, because it'll be costing the country millions, probably billions of euros.
Absolutely. You've spoken about the international implications as well, even as the government is trying to balance its debt reduction along with its social programs. But if, hypothetically speaking, an agreement is not reached by Christmas, how might this affect investor confidence in Belgium?
Well, of course it is. I mean, already in Belgium, we have a 5-party coalition.
Yes.
And coalition governments are very difficult because it requires agreement on all parties, and they're from different political wings. So that is already much more difficult to start with. But I think it will be negotiations, what the government could roll back on, what the unions are insisting on. But there's obviously designed to be increased pressure. And this is 3 days of strike, and then there's demands for Christmas. So I can think we'll expect a crisis, an ongoing crisis, which will definitely affect investor confidence. So, and that is bad for the government, which needs as much money as it can get at the moment.
Absolutely, Ms. Mutler. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, putting what's taking place in the United States and in Belgium into perspective. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to Slovenia. We're now learning that Slovenians have voted against a law that would have legalized assisted dying for terminally ill adults. According to unofficial results released by the State Election Commission, the partial count shows 53.43% opposed and 46.57% in favour. The law, passed by Parliament in July, was sent to a binding referendum after a citizens' initiative led by right-wing politician Alice Primk. Primk celebrated the result, stating it demonstrates that the culture of life has defeated the cult of death. Supporters of the bill had argued that it would provide relief to adults facing unbearable suffering with no chance of recovery. Take a look.
Zato, ker sem jaz bolana, 4. stadij raka in ne bi rada trpela. Dala sem pa že skozi očeta pa mamo, oče raka, mama demenco, tako da vem, kako je to. Pravico do končanja življenja ja, ampak tukaj ne glasujemo samo za pravico, ampak glasujemo za tale zakon, ki bi pa po mnenju mnogih moral biti dosti boljši.
Shifting focus away from Slovenia towards Lithuania, we're now learning that Lithuania's Vilnius airport temporarily halted its operations yesterday as it reportedly found weather balloons moving towards its airspace. This caused the airport to divert some of its incoming flights to other cities. This comes as repeated drone sightings and incursions have troubled European aviation in the recent months. Such incidents have been reported at airports in Copenhagen and Brussels, with the Vilnius airport closure becoming the 9th shutdown in Lithuania's capital since early October. According to Lithuanian authorities, the recent airspace disruptions were due to weather balloons.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The Kremlin said it would wait for official details on the US-Ukraine updated peace framework, with spokesperson Dmitry Peskov noting Moscow has yet to receive a formal information despite media reports from Geneva. This comes after Vladimir Putin said the original 28-point US plan could be a basis for ending the war. The US and Ukraine have said that they have drafted a refined peace framework in Geneva to revise an earlier plan criticized as too favorable to Russia, with both sides committing to intensive work before a Thursday deadline. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has urged German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to adopt a rational and pragmatic China policy, calling on Berlin to prioritize shared interests during their meeting at the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The talks signal a move to repair strained ties after German Foreign Minister postponed his China visit due to lack of high-level meetings. Senior BBC figures Michael Prescott, Samir Shah, Sir Robbie Gibb and Caroline Thompson will face MP questions today. This comes after a leaked Prescott memo led to the resignations of the Director General and Head of News. Prescott will speak publicly for the first time about his concerns over BBC reporting, including Panorama's edit of Trump's speech. French President Emmanuel Macron has met with his counterpart Brice Oligui Nguema from Gabon. In Libreville, the two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a reinvented partnership following bilateral talks. The Israeli army has released a video claiming to show the strike that killed Hezbollah's top military in the southern suburb of Beirut, despite a U.S.-brokered truce a year ago. The strike, the first on the outskirts of the Lebanese capital in months, targeted Iran-backed Hezbollah's acting chief of staff, Ali Tabtabai, the military said in a statement. Indonesia has introduced the Global Citizenship of Indonesia (GCI) permit, allowing former Indonesian citizens to live and work in the country indefinitely as a substitute for dual citizenship, which remains illegal under national law. The policy is modeled after India's OCI program, applies to adults who must otherwise choose a single nationality at the age of 18. More than 11,000 people in 7 Malaysian states have been affected by flooding caused by torrential rain. A report from the National Disaster Management Agency showed 11,009 people from 3,839 families who have been affected by the flooding as of 6 a.m. local time. Now we start with Russia and Ukraine. The Kremlin has said that it considers it to be inappropriate to discuss elements of European counter-proposals on Ukraine, including wording related to NATO. Through the media, Kremlin officials stressed that negotiations should remain confidential. Moscow also stated that there are currently no plans for a meeting this week between Russian and U.S. delegations, and noted that it has not received any official information from the Geneva talks on potential Ukraine peace efforts. Separately, the Kremlin has confirmed that a telephone call is scheduled between President Vladimir Putin and the President of Turkey today. Now for this discussion, we welcome Alexei Haran. He's a professor of comparative politics, joins us live from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now,
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, what do you think? What lies? What are the challenges, and what are the common grounds for U.S., Russia, and Kyiv to agree on this peace plan?
Look, at this point, there's no common ground between Russia and Ukraine, because the so-called 28-point peace plan, which we saw in media, it wasn't confirmed officially, that was based on Russian document. This was recognized by Secretary Rubio, who initially wasn't involved in that issue. So we know that there was another document prepared by American side, which was discussed in Kyiv, and now it was discussed in Switzerland. And now it takes into what we have out of these negotiations is we have the document which is agreed framework. It's framework. It's not the final deal, but framework, which includes Ukrainian and European suggestions. Because basically you cannot talk about Ukraine without Ukraine, and you cannot decide for Europe without Europe, because there were some points regarding Europe which were not discussed with Europe. Okay, so at this point we have a plan which seemed to be adopted by American and Ukrainian side and partially by Europeans. How Russia would react to that, this is another question, because definitely it's different from what was published in the in press. Some points, yeah, they are confirmed, but others are changed which reflects Ukrainian position, because, you know, Russia is aggressor, Ukraine is a victim on aggressor. Ukraine cannot give up its land. You in India are in the same situation. Part of your territory is occupied by other states. Do you agree to give it up? The answer is no. Very well. So why should we give up Ukrainian territory to Russia? And Russia is aggressor. Why should we diminish Ukrainian army as Russia demands? Again, Russia is attacking Ukraine, not Ukraine is attacking Russia. So why should we diminish our army, which is fighting about aggressor? So all these things, they were changed in the edited document which would appear after negotiations in Switzerland. Again, for me, basically, Russia doesn't want any peace at this point. They would like to continue. So we'll see what will be the Russian reaction to that. I think Russia would reveal what it really wants. It wants either capitulation of Ukraine or continuation of aggression. So we'll see.
And Professor, what do you think, what is US's role as a mediator and Turkey's role in facilitating communication between Russia and Western nations?
Turkey's role?
Yes.
Okay, well, Turkey was very instrumental in exchange of prisoners. Yes, that's right. Turkey confirms the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is very important. Turkey recognizes Crimea as the legal territory of Ukraine. I'm not sure that they were involved in other issues that were discussed in Switzerland, frankly speaking. I don't know this information. I don't think that Turkey now has tools to influence direct negotiations with the United States and preparation of this document. Yes, Turkey, they have relations both with Russia and Ukraine. They are trying to play the role of mediator and intermediary. They would like to. So we know that Istanbul is a place where there are negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, but for the time being, you know, these negotiations were stopped.
Yes.
They reached nothing besides, with exception of exchange of prisoners of war.
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Professor Alexei Hara for joining us today from Kyiv and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. Ukrainians have expressed skepticism that peace talks in Geneva between Kyiv and the United States and the European partners would end the war with Russia. Many residents claim that they fear the proposals under discussion could weaken Ukraine after earlier drafts reportedly included ceding territory and limiting military ambitions. Let's listen into what some of the residents have shared.
По-перше, це вже якісь новини позитивні на мій рахунок. Слава Богу, що якось світова спільнота відреагувала на ці ганебні 28 пунктів, які були, тому що це була просто капітуляція України. Особливо план Трампа, це взагалі капітуляція для України. Думаю, що український народ не погодиться. Якщо навіть вони підпишуть, і їх треба реалізувати, а буде хто реалізовувати український народ, а він з цим не погоджується.
Я вважаю, що воно повинно до чогось прийти. Так не може все далі продовжатися. На якихось умовах вони повинні це вже зупинити, я не знаю. Але віддавати землю України теж неправильно.
Now we have a breaking news. Moscow's mayor confirmed that they have downed one drone en route to Moscow. As a result, the country's air transport regulator states that Zhukovsky Airport in Moscow introduces temporary restrictions on flights. The Domodedovo and Sheremetyevo airports first imposed similar limits but have now lifted the restrictions. Now we move on to EU. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic has recently met with U.S. Secretary of State Commerce Howard Lutnick and U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer. in their first official visit to Belgium's capital city, Brussels. Briefing on the discussions that he held with them, Šefčovič has stated that the EU and US have reached a proper deal, but more deliberation is still required on its implementation. He's particularly stressed on steel and derivatives, where he raised the issue of reducing tariffs and forming a common understanding on the meetings that needs of global overcapacity. Let's listen into what he has shared.
We also recognize that more work lies ahead, especially on steels and derivatives, where we seek both to reduce tariff and to confront global overcapacity together. And this is a priority area for the EU, as recently demonstrated by the adoption of our steel regulation to help restore balance to the EU steel market. And finally, we discussed the forward-looking agenda, including critical minerals, where we share the goal of securing reliable supplies while strengthening our respective industrial base.
Moreover, the discussions also included other critical raw materials linked with economic security. Commenting on the recent talks, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys has referred to an agreement that was reached earlier in August and further emphasized on the need for its swift implementation. Let's listen in.
We cannot be in the permanent fixing phase. We have to have the normal agreement on steel and aluminium and work on it. We have to implement swiftly what was agreed back in August, and that is what I'm really looking into.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Shyam Batra. He's a British politician and former London mayoral candidate, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Shyam, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, to what extent should the EU and US coordinate their policies on steel tariffs and global overcapacity, and how could such cooperation affect their economic relations with each other?
Are you talking about Europe?
Yes, Europe.
Yes. Well, I mean, you probably heard the news yesterday that one of our billionaires has left the UK because of all of the bad situations, and he's in steel. So I think the European Union situation, they have a severe control on everything on 28 countries. And the way the steel manufacturing, etc., has been dealt with, I think it needs to be kind of overhauled. It's long overdue as well. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time, that we don't know who is in control of this. And not only that, what effect does it give to the UK and other countries in the world?
Right. And what challenges and common grounds do you think US and Europe has to progress on these trade talks?
Well, I mean, the US has extensive programs over there, as you know, and plus the trade tariffs as well, which are going to impact on the steel and industry, because most of the situation that's happened, because Trump has raised all these trade situations, that given rise to a lot of issues that have gone on. But in other words, sorry, I think I had a lag there. What happens to Europe in terms of supplying the trade to the various other countries, and not only that, to the rest of the world, remains to be seen. I mean, the prices are what they are, according to the systems that are set up. But it is a huge business, very huge business. And I noticed that when Trump did the trade tariffs, he segmented them out of the way, because obviously it's big money. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussions going on in the very near future about how and who is going to supply and who is going to send and so forth. There is a lot of, I mean, if you look at Africa as well, the steel industry in Africa is massive. It's very, very big. I mean, it could be a massive exporter one day. We don't know, but it is not part of Europe. It is not part of US. It is not part of UK. It's just Africa in its own sense. So in those realms, I think I do think it needs to be completely overhauled in terms of who is using this, who is going to be the dominant leader in the world. Is it Europe? Is it US? Is it both? We don't know at this moment in time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Shyam Batra, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, looking at BBC, senior figures involved in the BBC's recent troubles will be questioned by the MPs today. Michael Prescott, a former editorial advisor who has raised issues with BBC reporting, including Panorama's editing of the US President Donald Trump's speech, as it will be addressed in the matter publicly for the first time when he appears before the House of Commons committee. Earlier this month, an internal memo was released written by Prescott, which was leaked to the press, leading to the resignations of the BBC's Director General and Head of News. However, BBC Chairman Samir Shah will be giving evidence and also is under pressure for handling of the affair, and fellow board members Sir Robbie Gibb and Caroline Thompson. Now we welcome back Mr. Shyam Batra. He's a British politician and former London mayoral candidate, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Shyam, for staying with us. Now, Thank you. Now, looking at this, how should parliamentary oversight be exercised when media organizations become embroiled in controversies and scandals, and where is this line between legitimate scrutiny and political pressure?
Well, I think Trump wants to teach the BBC a lesson, hence he's upped his stake from 1 billion to 5 billion in compensation, but the BBC are not having any of this. As you quite rightly said, Michael Prescott is going to appear against the MPs committees, I think maybe today or later on this afternoon. But there is Caroline Daniel as well, the former editorial advisor, who is going to also speak in front of the Culture and Sports Media Committee today as well. I think BBC has some big problems, and it's been long overcoming anyway, because a lot of people in the UK do not like to subscribe to the BBC. They find it very biased, one-way-sided. And now that the doctrine of this sort of stuff, let's just say for Trump for now, has come out, I did say in your last conversations that how many other media outlets are doing the same thing. We don't know. We don't have a clue. But this is the very first time that something like this has happened, where something has been publicly announced that it's been doctored, and somebody has investigated the Telegraph, for example. I wait to hear today how the speech is going to go at the House of Commons. And I don't know whether Trump is going to pursue the compensation claim against the BBC. If it does, the BBC will close down. Intergovernment alliance as well, suing from the US to the UK is sometimes quite very difficult, and vice versa anyway, because there are two different countries. Yes. But the BBC being a world organization as well, having BBC World as well, I'm not quite sure how this video got out, and was it through the BBC World or was it through national BBC? But the BBC have got severe problems with this, and I think there'll be more issues coming out very soon from them, because I think they've been doing a lot of this stuff all the way through, especially for Trump. They didn't want him into power. And one way would have been to show that video worldwide that he did incite a riot, which obviously he clearly didn't. So there are a lot of issues going on with this. I mean, we've got Sir Robbie as well, BBC senior editor and director, who is going to also come under scrutiny. A lot of people have resigned, but Mr. Shah should have dealt with this very, very quickly and promptly like that, but he didn't. He thought it would just brush under the carpet, because media sometimes feel that they are far more stronger than the public and they can influence a lot of people's opinions and stuff. And it's not right. But the BBC has been operating in this callous way for many, many years. They take a lot of money from our public, and apparently it's compulsory to pay the BBC, but people don't want to pay. I personally don't. I'm not going to be part of it. I don't see their programs. I'm not interested in their stuff. I look at all other media news around the world and find out whether it's factual or not. And then, because I do my own podcast shows, etc., and I want to ensure that the information I give to our people is honest and truthful. And this is the first and foremost thing that any organisation, such as the Broadcasting House or the United Kingdom, which has been going for so many years, should have been really upfront and dealt with this, and not even doctored his video. Why did they need to doctor it? It does not make any sense to me. It just clearly shows that they did not want to see this man in power at that time. And unfortunately, it happened that he couldn't get into power. So I think it's wrong, but this is an alarm bell for all of the media outlets around the world to wake up, because if they have been doctoring this, if the BBC have done this, then I think there are many, many others who have been playing the game as well, especially to political leaders and other sources.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Shyam Batra for sharing that insight from London. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Spain. Spain's chief prosecutor, Alvaro Garcia Ortiz, has resigned after the Supreme Court found him guilty of leaking confidential information in a case involving the partner of a leading opposition figure. The decision delivers a significant blow to Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who appointed Garcia Ortiz in 2022 and has repeatedly defended him. In a letter to Justice Minister Felix Bolaños, Garcia Ortiz said he was stepping down out of profound respect for the court, even though the sentence banning him from his post for 2 years has not yet formally taken effect. The Supreme Court has not released its full rationale, and Garcia Ortiz may still appeal to Spain's Constitutional Court or the European Court of Human Rights. Government spokesperson Pilar Alegría has said that Madrid respects the decision but disagrees with it, warning that the lack of full ruling and the absence of judicial unanimity set a worrying precedent. Now we move on to Belgium. Belgium's Prime Minister Bart De Wever has said that his five-party coalition has finally reached a budget agreement for next year. After months of fractious negotiations, the deal was struck after marathon talks that ran from Sunday morning into the early hours of Monday, meeting the Christmas deadline De Wever set earlier this month. The package includes tax hikes on share purchases, airline tickets, and natural gas, as well as a newly levy on banks. Combined with spending cuts, the government plans to reduce the deficit by more than 9 billion euros. Through 2029, Belgium's budget gap is expected to hit 4.5% of the GDP this year, with debt above 104%, far exceeding EU targets. Despite the agreement, a 3-day national strike over pension reforms will still go ahead. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, And India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
Gaza's fragile peace is on the brink. Hope emerges amid deepening devastation. Ceasefire falters under ongoing violations. Diplomatic breakthrough faces overwhelming challenges. Gaza's future is uncertain whilst reconstruction is underway.
Hello, you're watching another episode of Explained with me, Asuma Katauka. Israel's latest strikes in Gaza and even beyond its borders have raised urgent questions about the durability of the ceasefire plan that was supposed to hold more than a year of grinding conflict. Before we break down the events of the past 48 hours, we first need to understand the 20-point ceasefire peace plan that was meant to keep both sides from returning to open fire. Because without that context, the renewed violence, the accusations of truce violations, and the widening regional fallout are impossible to fully grasp. For more than a year, Gaza lays in ruins. People, families displaced, and both sides traumatized. By late 2025, hope seemed lost until a surprising diplomatic push led by the US President Donald Trump offered a glimmer of stability. Now, with Israeli airstrikes continuing despite the ceasefire, and with a major strike in Beirut killing a senior Hezbollah commander, many are asking whether the peace plan ever had a real chance or whether it's already unraveling. Today on Explained, we break down what happened, why it matters, and what it means for the fragile calm the world was told had finally arrived. The proposal, which is a sweeping 20-point peace plan, was controversial from the start, but it rapidly gained momentum and brought Israel and Hamas closer to agreement than anyone predicted. Today we break down how this plan came to be, what it actually says, how it's unfolding on the ground, and what it could mean for the future of Israel, Gaza, and the wider region. To understand why this plan appeared at this moment, we need to go back to the beginning. On October 7, 2023, Hamas carried out a massive attack on Israel, killing around 1,200 people and taking over 240 hostages. Israel responded with a relentless military campaign in Gaza, months of bombardment that destroyed hospitals, schools, and entire urban centers. What followed was one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern Middle Eastern history. Gaza's infrastructure collapsed, food and water became scarce, roughly 2 million people, almost the entire population, were displaced. By early 2025, both sides were exhausted. Families of hostages protested daily in Tel Aviv demanding action, while Gazan civilians were calling publicly for the war to end. International pressure mounted, especially from Arab states who feared the conflict would spill over to them as well. In September 2025, President Donald Trump unveiled a new proposal, bold, detailed, and unlike previous attempts at peacemaking, many observers dismissed it immediately, believing neither Israel nor Hamas would consider it. But to widespread surprise, both sides engaged. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared with Trump at the White House on 29 September and accepted the plan. On 3 October, Hamas issued a public response. It agreed to return all 48 remaining hostages in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and Gaza detainees, and it signaled willingness to hand Gaza's governance to a technocratic Palestinian committee. But it avoided addressing the plan's requirement that it disarms, which is a central element of the proposal. Despite this, negotiators from the United States, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey accelerated their efforts. Trump imposed multiple deadlines, pressure rose on both sides, and civilians in Gaza and Israel amplified their calls for a breakthrough. On 8 October, Secretary of State Marco Rubio handed the president a note during a televised event indicating that an agreement was very close. Hours later, Trump announced that both Israel and Hamas had signed off on the first phase of the peace plan. The agreement was formally signed the next day in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. At the heart of this initiative is a detailed 20-point framework which was published by the White House. It lays out the ceasefire, the hostage exchange, governance reforms, security arrangements, and a long-term vision for Gaza's reconstruction and political future. President Trump's plan begins with a fundamental redefinition of Gaza's future. It states that Gaza must become a de-radicalized terror-free zone that poses no threat to Israel, Egypt, or any neighboring country. This vision is paired with a commitment to redevelop Gaza for the benefit of its population, whose suffering over years of blockade and war has been immense from the outset. The plan frames its purpose as both a security solution and a humanitarian reconstruction project. The first major operational step of the plan is the immediate end of the war. If both Israel and Hamas accept the proposal, all military actions would cease at once. Israeli forces would withdraw to a designated line inside Gaza, where they would pause to facilitate the release of hostages. During this period, aerial strikes, artillery fire, and ground offensives would halt entirely, and both sides would freeze their positions until conditions were met for a complete and staged withdrawal of Israeli troops. Central to the plan is the return of hostages within 72 hours of Israel's public acceptance of the agreement. Hamas would be required to release all Israeli hostages, those still alive, as well as the remains of those who have passed away. Once this process is completed, Israel would carry out a corresponding prisoner release of its own. This includes 250 Palestinians serving life sentences and 1,700 Gazans detained after October 7, 2023 attack. including all women and children held since then, for every Israeli whose remains are returned. Israel would release the remains of 15 Palestinians. This reciprocal exchange is intended to resolve one of the most painful elements of the conflict. Adding to a point was Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and disarmament will receive amnesty. Those wishing to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage. Immediately upon acceptance of the plan, humanitarian aid which surged into Gaza, the volume and content of this aid would match and likely exceed the levels outlined in the January 19, 2025 humanitarian agreement. This means large-scale rehabilitation of water, electricity, and sewage systems, as well as support for hospitals, bakeries, and equipment needed to clear the rubbles and reopen roads, and entry and distribution would take place through the United Nations, the Red Crescent, and other independent international institutions. With neither Israel nor Hamas permitted to interfere, the plan also reopens the Rafah crossing in both directions using the January 2025 mechanism. Governance in Gaza would undergo a major transformation. The plan calls for the establishment of a temporary technocratic Palestinian committee to run the territory's day-to-day administration. This committee would be apolitical, made up of qualified Palestinian professionals and international experts. Oversight would come from a new international body called the Board of Peace, chaired by President Trump and including foreign leaders such as former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. The board would manage reconstruction funding and ensure high standards of governance until the Palestinian Authority completes its reform program and is capable of assuming full control. Economically, the plan envisions a complete rebuilding of Gaza through what it describes as a Trump-led development initiative. A panel of experts who helped design and construct modern cities across the Middle East would craft a comprehensive redevelopment strategy. Their goal is to integrate security, governance, and investment frameworks to create jobs, expand opportunities, and build a sustainable future for Gaza's economy. A special economic zone would also be established, offering preferential tariffs and access to participating countries in order to attract foreign capital. The plan stresses that no one will be forced to leave Gaza residents. Residents who wish to leave temporarily will be free to do so and equally free to return. The broader vision is to encourage people to remain and participate in building a new, stable, and prosperous Gaza. The plan also contains strict provisions regarding Hamas and other armed factions. They would be completely excluded from governance, directly or indirectly, and all military infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons factories, would be dismantled. Gaza would undergo a monitored process of demilitarization, supported by an internationally funded weapons buyback and reintegration program. Independent monitors would verify that all weapons are permanently placed beyond use. Regional partners would act as guarantors to ensure compliance and to confirm that Gaza no longer poses any threat. To support those changes, the United States would work with Arab and international allies to create a temporary international stabilization force, or ISF, which would deploy immediately inside of Gaza. This force would train and support vetted Palestinian police units and coordinate with Jordan, Egypt, who have significant counter-terrorism and policing experience. The ISF would work alongside Israel and Egypt to secure border areas, prevent weapons smuggling, and facilitate the safe and rapid movement of goods entering Gaza for reconstruction. A formal deconfliction mechanism would be established to coordinate security operations among all parties. The plan explicitly states that Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza as the ISF gradually establishes stability. The Israeli Defense Forces would withdraw in stages, guided by conditions related to demilitarization and verified security benchmarks. The IDF would eventually leave Gaza entirely, aside from a temporary perimeter presence designed to protect against any resurgence of armed groups. If Hamas fails to comply or delays its acceptance of the proposal, the plan would still move forward in the areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF, including the expanded humanitarian effort. In other words, progress would not be halted by Hamas's refusal. The plan also includes an interfaith dialogue initiative aimed at reshaping public narratives among Palestinians and Israelis, promoting values of tolerance, coexistence, and the tangible benefits that peace could bring to both populations. Finally, the document outlines a political horizon. As Gaza's redevelopment advances and the Palestinian Authority completes its reform program, conditions may emerge for a credible path forward towards Palestinian self-determination and statehood. A long-standing aspiration for many Palestinians, the United States commits to facilitating dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to define this political horizon and to build the foundations of a peaceful future for both people. Implementation of the peace plan began quickly but faced major complications. On October 13, 2025, Hamas released 20 living hostages to the Red Cross, many appearing injured and malnourished. Israel began releasing thousands of Palestinian detainees, though many returned showing signs of abuse, claims that Israel denies. The recovery and identification of deceased hostages progressed slowly and became a point of tension. Despite the ceasefire, violence persisted. Israeli airstrikes on November 22nd and 23rd killed dozens of Palestinians, with Israel claiming the strikes were triggered by a Hamas fighter attacking soldiers near the Yellow Line. The withdrawal boundary agreed in the truce. Hamas accused Israel of nearly 500 violations within the first 44 days, including airstrikes, incursions, and firing on civilians, according to Gaza's health ministry. At least 67 children were killed after the ceasefire began, prompting criticism from human rights groups. At the same time, Israel accused Hamas of conducting attacks across the Yellow Line and failing to disarm or relinquish control of Gaza, key requirements for the plan. These exchanges underscored the fragility of the ceasefire and the difficulty both sides face in meeting the agreement's terms. Humanitarian aid distribution also fell short. Although the agreement required immediate full-scale aid entry, Israel severely restricted supplies in the early weeks. Instead of the planned 600 trucks per day, fewer than 150 trucks entered Gaza initially. Under U.S. pressure, deliveries rose to about 800 daily by mid-November, but still failed to meet Gaza's needs. In response, the U.S. established a CENTCOM-led Civil-Military Coordination Center to manage aid flows and resolve operational disputes. Diplomatic efforts continued as the situation worsened. On November 23rd, a Hamas delegation traveled to Cairo to meet mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. to address alleged Israeli violation that threatened to derail the peace process. Meanwhile, tensions escalated further in Lebanon, where Israel continued airstrikes despite a separate 2024 ceasefire, causing hundreds of casualties, according to the Lebanese health ministry. International forces have begun deploying to Gaza to train the new Palestinian police and support demilitarization. The technocratic governing committee is being formed, and the Board of Peace is starting its oversight role. However, with both sides entrenched, humanitarian needs unmet, and violence continuing in Gaza and beyond, the peace plan's future remains uncertain. Reports from Gaza's government media office indicates that Israel has violated the United States brokered Gaza ceasefire at least 497 times in 44 days, resulting in the deaths of 342 Palestinian civilians, most of whom were children, women, and the elderly. The office strongly condemned what it described as systematic and serious breaches of the ceasefire and international humanitarian law. It stated that Israel bears full responsibility for the humanitarian and security consequences of these actions, which continue to undermine the terms of the October 10th agreement. Despite the ceasefire's mandate for unrestricted humanitarian access, Israel has persisted in heavily restricting aid and medical supplies entering Gaza. Israel has launched another wave of air attacks across the Gaza Strip, killing at least 24 Palestinians in what local authorities called yet another violation of the 6-week-old ceasefire. Israel has justified the strikes by claiming a Hamas fighter had attacked Israeli soldiers inside Gaza's Yellow Line zone, territory Israel continues to control under the deal. Israeli officials said they killed 5 senior Hamas fighters. In response, Hamas immediately rejected Israel's account, demanding evidence and accusing Israel of manufacturing pretexts to evade its obligations in return to large-scale military operations. Reports from the ground mention that the ceasefire exists largely in name only, despite the declared pause in fighting. Israel has carried out multiple airstrikes, leaving Palestinians feeling unsafe and skeptical about Israel's commitment to the agreement. Palestinian authorities report that families in northern Gaza are now besieged as Israeli forces push deeper into the enclave and in what they say is a violation of the boundary lines established in the ceasefire. Israel's expansion beyond the unmarked Yellow Line, which already allowed it to control more than half the coastal territory, has heightened fears of collapse of the truce. Meanwhile, Gaza's Forensic Evidence Department reports severe challenges in identifying the bodies of Palestinians returned by Israel as part of the agreement. Staff say many of the 330 returned bodies show signs of torture, mutilation, and execution, and that they urgently need laboratory equipment to conduct fingerprint and DNA analysis. So far, only 90 bodies have been identified. Authorities are calling on international organizations to provide resources to help complete the identification process and allow families to reclaim their relatives. The continuing violence in Lebanon comes amid a similar strained ceasefire in Gaza, where Israel has also carried out airstrikes despite an official truce. Both situations highlight the challenges of implementing ceasefires in the region. Agreements may be signed, but enforcement is fragile. Violations are frequent, and civilians bear the brunt of the escalating tensions. The latest strikes in Beirut, killing Hezbollah's top commander, underline how quickly a fragile peace plan can unravel and spill across borders, linking the unrest in Gaza with the renewed hostilities in Lebanon. Let's take a look into what's transpiring on the Lebanon front.